welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be Sewing for Noobs episode 6. Finally, we are going to start sewing and our first project is going to be a pillowcase. Pillowcases are the best beginner's project in my opinion, simply because it teaches you a lot of little techniques that will serve you well for the rest of your sewing career. It's also very nice and straightforward. There's nothing too complicated about them because, you know, it's already stressful enough when you're trying to tackle your first project, so I thought we'll ease you in. When it comes to fabric, you will need about a meter of 45-inch wide or 115 centimeters of cotton fabric. Go for medium weight, something that you would like to slip in because, you know, put your head on it. And stay away from the shiny stuff. People who wants to go for satin and stuff, I do understand the struggle, I do, but no, stay away from it because you're going to regret it. When it comes to patterns, so that's what I'm giving you. It's a template to follow and put back onto a piece of paper. That's the most energy efficient, paper efficient way I found to do it for you, simply because the pattern is too big. You're going to see it's going to be a bit too big. Alright, so let's get going with the tutorial.
So after you made your pattern, what you need is your fabric, and fold it in half lengthwise and match up the two selvages, so the two sides of your fabric. And by putting them together, you will ensure that your grain line is at the right position. Your grain line will run parallel to your selvage. So now you can take your pattern and place it on the fabric. So make sure to respect the grain line, so it is this little arrow on the pattern, and the grain line, just for reference, is a running parallel to the selvage, so from the side of your fabric. So I'm just going to place it on, and I'm also going to measure it so I know that it's nice and even on my fabric. The next thing you can do is put some weights on your pattern and draw around it so you can cut it later, or you can just pin your pattern to the fabric and cut around it. So when using fabric shears, there's just a few things to keep in mind. The first thing is always cut your fabric with your scissors in contact with the table. Never away, always on the table. That's because otherwise you're going to lose control and you're not going to be as precise as you could be. When pinning your pattern to your fabric, make sure that you place your pins within the pattern and not over your cutting line. Otherwise, you're going to cut over your pins and you're going to destroy your shears. That's not a thing that you want. Also, when it comes to notches, they're going to be clearly marked on any patterns. You need to cut a slit within the seam allowance, just so we know that there is something going on at this place. If you do not do that, you're going to end up being lost. Alright, so now you should have two pieces of rectangle cut up, and on one of the sides you should have some notches cut up on either sides. And now it's time for me to introduce to you your brand new best friend. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, the iron. So now we can separate our two pieces of fabric. We need to hem the opening first before we can assemble our pillowcase. So on our first piece of fabric, we are going to fold the short edge on itself, and we are going to stop at the notch that we cut earlier on. Give it a good press to lock everything in place. And make sure that you have folded your fabric wrong sides together. Once that's done, we are going to repeat this process once again and fold over that flap on itself another time. And secure everything in place with a good press. On the second piece of fabric, we're going to repeat the same process, but on a much smaller scale. All I want to do is get rid of that raw edge, so I'm going to do a double turn of 0.5 centimeter each time and press everything as I go. So it's the same but on a much smaller scale. And then you can pin everything in place so it won't move on you when you start sewing. So now we are going to secure everything in place and we are going to do a top stitch. Top stitch is going to be a straight stitch that you run along the edge as close as possible to the edge, and it's going to be both functional and decorative. So as you can see, I've done it on the small flap. When pinning, always pin your fabric on the opposite direction from your sewing line. It's going to be a lot easier to remove your pins. Alright, so top stitching requires accuracy. It needs to be an even stitch, simply because it's a visible stitch. It is going to be sewn very close to the edge of your fabric, so use a part of your foot as a reference point where you can match the side of your fabric to that point. So usually I like to use the inner ring of my foot as an anchor point, but some people like to use the side of their foot. So as you go along, you're going to develop your own style of sewing and see what works and what doesn't work for you. As you can see as well, put the bulk of your fabric on the left hand side, never on the inside, simply because there's not much space. And always a back tack, reverse your stitch at the beginning and at the end of your stitching. And lastly, do not sew over your pins. You can damage your machine and you can break your needles. Also remember to take your time and have fun with that, because you're sewing for pleasure as well, and don't forget that. If it's not perfect at the beginning, well, don't worry, you're going to have plenty of occasion to get better, and practice makes perfect. So now your two pieces of fabric are hemmed, and you will have one longer than the other. So that's completely normal. You're going to take your longer piece first and lay it on your table and make sure that the right side of the fabric is facing up. So now you're going to take your smaller piece of fabric and you're going to put it on top of the longer piece and make sure that right side is facing down. So obviously they're not the same size, but you're going to see how we're going to change that. So as you can see on the bigger one, we have the notches still appearing. So you're going to match up the top of the shorter piece of fabric to that notch. And you're going to see that all the other sides are going to match up, so you can pin them in place. Once everything is nice and secure, take the flap and fold it over the shorter piece of fabric that you have. So make sure that it's folded all the way to that notch and that there is not a little step in between, because otherwise it's going to show later on. And then you can pin it in place. Now we can sew around the 3 remaining sides with a straight stitch and a 1 cm seam allowance. Do not touch the top where the flap is, because that's already finished. So place the edge of your fabric at the 1 cm markup on your machine. If you do not know where it is, I would invite you to check your instruction manual. And don't forget to back tack your stitching if you want to secure everything in place. When reaching a corner, just stop a few stitches before it and then walk your stitches with your hand wheel. Just leave your needle down, put your foot up, turn your fabric, and then put your foot down and keep on sewing. So now we are going to finish our raw edges with a zigzag stitch. That's going to prevent fraying. So change your setting to zigzag, and you will need to play around with your width settings. So I would advise you to try on pieces of fabric beforehand. I ended up having a size 3 zigzag stitch. So now all you need to do is sew all around your 3 sides again with the zigzag stitch within the seam allowance. Do not go over your sewing line, and it's just a stitch to try to prevent fraying. So it's possible to go around a corner with your zigzag. If you do not feel confident, you can just finish it off at one side and start again on the other if you want to. You do not need to back tack on the zigzag stitch because it's not going to come undone. So we are nearly done. All we need to do is finish up our corners. So if we want sharp corners, that is going to be too bulky. So grab your scissors and we are going to cut within the seam allowance to relieve some bulk. So as you can see, I'm cutting like a kind of a big V shape. Make sure not to cut through your sewing line, and that is to relieve bulk. So that way your corner can come out instead of being just all bunched up. So make sure to do that on all of your corners. So now you can turn your pillowcase around and you're going to see that the corners won't necessarily want to come out. So there's different ways about it, or you can wiggle them out, or you can use a pencil or a pair of scissors to push them out. If you're using an object to push them out, just make sure not to make a hole into your fabric, because that would be a bit sad to put so much time into it and have a big hole into it. But that's essentially it. Also, you're going to see that the way we finished up the top is going to allow us to not have any raw edges showing off whenever your pillow is inside. So as you can see, so it's going to be a lot neater and it's going to be a lot more professional looking. So you can wow your friends with your newfound skills.
Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you found it helpful. If you did, you can leave a thumbs up and you can also subscribe if you don't want to miss any of my videos ever again. Alright, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye!